It's the How to Write Funny podcast. This is Scott Dickers. Today I'm speaking with Todd Rosernberg, creator of Odd Todd. So how did you come up with the nickname Odd Todd?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I was working in book publishing, and I was always doing cartoons and stuff, and I decided I was going to try and do my own line of greeting cards, and I was trying to think of like a catchy name for my line of greeting cards, and I kicked around a bunch of different things, and I just ended up with Odd Todd Greetings, which made me sign up the domain name Odd Todd at the time, and I launched a line of greeting cards as Odd Todd Greetings, and that was the beginning of the Odd Todd name.
What became of this greeting card line?
I did a bunch of trade shows, and I actually sold a bunch of greeting cards, but I learned quickly that if you don't continually print and come up with new card lines, then your reorders sort of drop off. So I realized it was a bigger investment than I wanted it to be. So then I was contacted by eGreetings, which was one of the early like e-card sites, and they found me at a trade show or something. So I changed Odd Todd Greetings into e-cards. And at the time, eGreetings launched, they paid me, I think it was 10 cents every time an e-card was sent. And it was like, I would get these checks for thousands and it didn't make any sense to me, but I was like, holy shit, this is going to be my new career. I'm going to just do this because they'll send a card, 10,000 times. And I just kept getting these checks, but then it became 5 cents, and then it became 2 cents. And then it became a half a cent, and then it became rev share. And then I think I think they're still going or under some name, but
wait a minute. So you had some sort of handshake agreement with them about the 10 cents a greeting at first, right? No contract, and they were just weaseling out of their deal.
I think it was an open-ended contract where they could kind of do as they pleased. Yeah, it was a weird time. This is probably like 1995 or 6.
Oh, wow.
It was really early. It was early stuff.
There's barely an internet at that point.
Yeah. And that was it. And then I just had the domain name oddtodd.com, and it kind of sat there for a while just with greeting cards on it and links to e-greetings if people wanted to send my e-cards. But I just kept working as a special sales manager at a book publishing company. So that's what I was doing.
I'm fascinated by just how much success you had with this seemingly whimsical idea of, hey, I'm going to start a greeting card company. Like you were making thousands of dollars a month for a moment there. Take us back to before that. Like what led to that? What skills did you develop in the publishing industry or before that gave you the wherewithal to know what trade shows to go to or, how to market or sell yourself? All those skills and plus the comedy writing, those skills don't always necessarily come together in a young person.
Yeah. I mean, I'd always been doing cartoons ever since, elementary school. I remember doing them on like little index cards and stuff like that. And I remember my original dream was to be a newspaper cartoonist, and I had been sending out submissions to all sorts of places, and I was using a book called Humor in Cartoon Markets to kind of gather up all my rejections.
The Writer's Digest book.
Yeah, and I ended up with I started doing like kind of like a Far Side-ish sort of one panel thing, and I actually ended up sitting in front of the offices of the New York Post one morning and handing out packets of these single panel cartoons to the employees as they went to work. And on the front page, it said, if you like these cartoons, call your comics editor. And I gave the guy's name and extension and say you want these in the Post. And I thought it was like a brilliant thing. And I handed out like 100 packets that I'd printed out. And I waited by the phone for this guy to call and tell me that I was going to be in the Post. And he actually did get in touch days and days later just to tell me all the reasons why my cartoons would never be in the Post, because I had they were like dark and they had like blood and they had swastika and things like that. It was just, they were like looking back, they were like way off. But that single panel technique thing was what led to the greeting card thing. Because I could do like a front and then you open it up, and greeting cards and those far side-ish sort of single panel stuff sort of go hand in hand, where there's the one side A and side B to the cartooning. So that's what led into that.
I see. And it seems like you maybe got a tip from this comics editor to lose the swastikas and the blood for the greeting cards.
Yeah, but I was like, I loved blood. And I just thought like, Far Side had a certain darkness to it. And it wasn't like, a guy with I guess there was some murder and stuff, but it wasn't like the evil murder. It was like the funny, it was the funny murder to me. And someone gets an arm taken off or something. It was the funny kind. It wasn't the sick, demented kind, but apparently it doesn't look great next to Beetle Bailey or whatever else they were running then. So, and then of course that industry became a difficult thing to just get into in general because there's just so little space. Even then, it was nothing would move, and they were reducing the pages and all that. So that was it for my newspaper cartooning dream. Although I was published in a paper in San Francisco called Humor, and that was a very big deal for me because I'd never been accepted anywhere. So I don't know if that paper's still going. It was like a free humor paper called Humor, but they printed my cartoons, and that was the first time I ever got published, which was thrilling.
When did that happen? Before the New York Post adventure or after?
I think it was the same submission, so it was right around that time.
Those cartoons with the blood and the swastikas.
With the blood and the swastikas and stuff like that.
So they must not have been that bad. They were...
No, they're great. They're really great. I will put a link on oddtodd.com with a link because I scanned them in at one point so people could look at the origins of my cartooning, and they're hidden on my site somewhere. So I'll put a link up on my homepage.
I would love to see those.
Yeah.
So you're a very ambitious young man, and
yes.
In 1995-ish, around the mid-90s when this is happening, I assume you're probably like college age or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Where did all that ambition come from? Was it just like, I need to figure out a way to make a living, or was it more like just a burning desire to get your entertainment out there in front of people? What was motivating you, do you suppose?
I was always sort of a terrible student who didn't know I didn't know what I wanted to be at all, and I kind of floated through college with terrible grades, and I got out, and and it started to be the reality check of I have to figure out what I'm going to do for a living started to creep up as I was back in my parents' house, not working, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that people could actually make a living as a cartoonist, and it just kind of never clicked in that way before. And I guess, I had come from a background where, you grew up and you became a doctor, you became a businessman, and I wasn't from a particularly artistic family at all. So it just wasn't like, it always seemed like a hobby rather than a career thing. And then it just struck me, post college that I could actually do this and like make a whole living out of it, and I started to go down that road.
Did you get resistance from the family, or were they bemused by what you were trying to do?
I think my parents have always been very supportive. I think they were a little bit, taken aback by the idea that I just went through 4 years of college and then kind of came out and said, "Oh, I want to be a cartoonist." And they were sort of like, "Well, why didn't you go to art school? Why didn't you figure this out, while you were in college?" But I didn't. They were supportive. I think they were, a little bit concerned when they saw the blood and the Nazi stuff. But I eventually learned to kind of tone that back, and they, when it came finally time to do the greeting cards and stuff, they actually helped with the packing and the shipping out of the garage, and kind of became a part of the business. So it was, they were always on board with it. It was just, I'm not sure if they understood why it took me so long to figure out that the thing that I do all the time was something that I could actually do all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And why do you suppose you were doing it all the time? And where are we at this point? Where are you growing up?
Oh, I grew up in New Rochelle, which is a suburb of New York City, and basically, I was never particularly interested in school. I mean, I would do well in a single class that I was interested in, but if it was math or something like that, I would just fill up notebooks I would just kind of slice the pages up until like 8 panels and just draw out some scenario. And I think my disinterest in school sort of fueled my notebook ambition to doodle and to do things because I just wasn't paying attention in class. So I think I'm not sure if it was the chicken or the egg where doodling was the distraction or my distraction became doodling, but that's where it kind of all started.
But you must have gotten some kind of positive reinforcement from it on some level, unless maybe you didn't. Maybe it was all you were getting in trouble, but that made it more alluring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I never sort of became a great illustrator or anything like that. So, and for a long time, my work in notebooks and stuff were always like violent and weird, and it was heads chopping off. And one of my original characters was called Bob the Axe Murderer, and he would go around and he would just be violent, but it was funny. It was always done like funny. It was just, black pen, red pen sort of fun. And so I'm not sure if, I think people always thought they were weird, but I don't know if there was this like, oh, wow, you like cracked the code here, where it was just me maybe being angry that I had to sit through a geometry class maybe it was just an outlet for me being upset about having to sit there or upset about not understanding what was going on in class.
Is everything okay at home? You were getting along with the family and
yeah,
not too much strife? Brothers and sisters?
I have an older brother, and yeah, there was not. I didn't come from my household was my parents were both extraordinarily nice and supportive, and my brother too. He was on a different path where he was the great student, and I was the one crashing cars and getting in trouble and failing stuff, and he was always ambitious academically and otherwise. So we were kind of on the other side of the world in terms of early direction when, he went to University of Michigan, I went to University of Hartford. It was like that kind of trajectory that we were just different in that way. But we're,
So for whatever reason, you are making these drawings and really enjoying it, not really necessarily getting great feedback from anybody, but knowing in your heart that you love doing this and you're fueled by this powerful ambition to succeed at it once you get out of school. Yeah. And so you pursue some really interesting routes with the newspapers and with greeting cards. And once you get a little older and some of these things are panning out certain ways, sometimes they're not, where does your career take you then?
I mean, I had been working in publishing, and then the .com world started to explode, and I took a job at BarnesandNoble.com doing business development. And all along, I had been trying different ways to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I always felt like there was something for me to do here, and I don't know what it is. And if it wasn't cartooning, like I just couldn't find what it was. I always felt like a certain call, but I didn't understand. I didn't know where the phone was. It was like the phone was ringing, and I just was always opening drawers trying to figure out what this call would be about. And I remember I was probably at this point like 31 or something like that. And I remember I was seeing a therapist at the time because I started to get like freaked out over the idea that I was not going to be able to answer this ringing phone. And the therapist told me that I should actually give up on this ambition because I was doing okay in my career. I mean, I was able to function in the corporate world, and he sort of discouraged it, saying that the distraction of cartooning or whatever I wanted to become artistically was keeping me from succeeding in life, and that he's had people come through his doors who wanted to publish books or do this and that who end up lost. And it was a scary sort of, this was a kind of a practical therapist, but I remember sitting there and being like freaked out, like that I was going to be letting go of what I had been always feeling was going to break at some point.
That is so
Yeah.
interesting because in some ways, that's terrible advice that he gave you.
Yeah.
But in other ways, it's incredibly intelligent advice because obviously when people don't have this burning artistic ambition, they can lead perfectly emotionally healthy lives and devote themselves to their family or whatever. But it's just not the life of the artist who's,
Right.
totally fueled by creating some kind of artistic or entertainment work that they need to get in front of people. So you're freaked out by the advice.
I was freaked out by the advice, and interestingly enough, after I sort of did break out, I went back to him because I might have still been seeing him or something, but after things kind of broke, I went back to him and I was like freaking out because there was all this attention and stuff. And he said, like completely out of the blue, he was like, you know what? If I could do things over again, I think I would be really good at punching up scripts in Hollywood. I always felt like I could be doing this. And he started going down this road of these dreams that he had put aside. And I was like, you're a son of a bitch. You're like, did the thing where you abandoned the thing, and now you're spouting the abandoned the thing to kind of get me and everyone else to be on the page of your thing so you don't feel bad about your thing because that's what the thing should be that you do.
Exactly.
So now here I am showing up with like the thing that you said that I needed to abandon, and now it's the thing that's all cool and all this and that, and you're going to throw in my face that you had things beyond, you had your other issues that were driving this advice. Go play this. That was the last time I saw that guy. So
I'm glad.
Always second guess your therapist's advice.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah, it was like funny. So I was like, holy shit, it was weird. And it also got weird because he went on for a long time with it too, where it like triggered something in him. And I was like, oh. It's time to wrap this one up,
So you hightail it out of the therapist's office.
Yeah.
And but let's take us back though. I want to know how you got to there. You're working at barnesandnoble.com and you're trying to figure out where this phone is ringing from and how you can pick it up. It's this burning urge inside of you, but you can't figure out how to execute it, how to get it out there. So what kind of things do you try?
Well, after barnesandnoble.com, I took a job at a company called Atom Films, which was original short film entertainment on the net. This was like the year 2000, and they were buying up all the short films that they could get their hands on, and they had this massive library, and they were also developing animated series. Like there was all sorts of they would pay like crazy money for 5 episodes. They would pay $100,000 to this place, that place, and it was just. And I remember this stuff would come in, and I would look at it, and I had never animated anything before, but I was like, I may not be the greatest genius in the world, but I know I could do better than this. It was like this weird thing where I was doing business development for them, and I was looking at this stuff as it came in, and
you were judging it to decide if they should fund it or what?
No, they would buy it. I mean,
after they bought it. Okay.
It would be mine to sell and get on like a pocket PC or something like that and figure out what to, because they had this library of short films, but they didn't know what to do with any of it at the time because there's no iPhones, and watching video on the net was like buffering with a real player and stuff like that. So it was really early, but my job was basically go out and find money around this original content, which I never was really able to do, but as director of business development at Atom Films, I would have this library of stuff to look at, and the original animated content. There was some good stuff, but a lot of it was just I just remember feeling it kind of bubbling up again that I know I could do better than this. I know I'm better, and I don't even know how to animate or do anything, but just funny wise and otherwise. There was a weird light bulb where it was frustrating because I was so far away from any sort of creative job, and at this point I didn't know how I'd actually be able to turn my career path toward that, even though I knew it was what I was best at. Like any any glimpse of creative effort that I could ever make into my job, I would always do really well. Like when I was trying to sell books, I would always send flip books along with them to help with the sales. And like if it was for Adam Films, it was putting together some sort of graphic design page thing, it would always be like phenomenal, so I would always just look for creative outlets within the job. But it was, in terms of me having a creative job, I was a million miles away from that.
Yeah, that's so interesting because a lot of people are motivated negatively, like you're talking about, like getting angry, like, oh, I could do better than that. That was a big motivating force for me early in my career, but a lot of people think it kind of works the opposite. And for some people, maybe it does, where you're seeing certain cartoons that you think are amazing and you want to do something like that, but that's not really how it was working in your brain.
Yeah, there was some stuff that I was a fan of and amazed by, but
that's not the stuff that lit the fire under you.
Yeah, it was the stuff that was,
that
wow,
sucked.
they're paying a lot of money for the stuff that really, really sucks.
Yeah.
And I remember getting really frustrated with where I was at, because it started to dawn on me that I probably have been underestimating how good I actually am. And I just kind of always felt like it was something that was so far away, it was never meant for me to be or do. And then, here I am into my 30s, and it starts to dawn on me that I've probably sold myself short in terms of kind of treating what I do as a hobby rather than really going after it. And now here I'm at a point where I don't know what I could even do with my cartoons, because I'm not an animator and there's no newspaper outlets, and I kind of hadn't been working anyway, partially because of that therapist. But so there I was working and looking at these animations come in and just being sad about the fact that I didn't have an outlet at all for what I wanted to do or be,
So what do? You roll up your sleeves and what do you get cracking on?
Well, I got laid off from Adam Films. And
this is what during the .com bust.
This is 2001, probably the middle of 2001, something like that. And I had some money, and they gave me severance or whatever. And I started to and it was like right before the summer, so I kind of decided I was going to take the summer off and try and do something other than look for a job. I had time, and I went on to. I took an online course in Flash animation, and I started to I started to animate, and I bought a little graphics tablet. It was like a real small Wacom tablet, and I just started to do stuff. And I remember one of the first cartoons I did was like a cow mooing, and you could click it and it would moo, and then you clicked it somewhere else and it would like poop, and it was unbelievable to me that I like made something move. And I remember I sent it around, and I sent it to my parents. I also did a frog that would like ribbit or something like that, and I would send it around to friends. Like, to me, it was unbelievable, that I made something like interactive and that I could, do this stuff. And I think that's when my parents might have got a little concerned then, because I was like, look what I did this week. It'd be like a frog that would just sit there and like ribbit. So
right, unemployed 30-something.
Yeah,
that's what he's got.
I was like, look what I did. And then around that time, I started to think about the idea of starting a website that was going to be exactly 1 minute rant of an unemployed guy who would just be ranting about going to the drugstore, or ranting about something that happened on the street, or something that's happening in the house. And I started to do these recordings in a different voice, where I would just sit in front of the microphone, and I would start to like really get like real gravelly, and so I'd be like, I went down to the park today and some kid had a balloon, and I would just start doing all these recordings. And I remember it being weird because my computer desk was set up by the front door, and I remember thinking like you could definitely hear me in the hallway, and I would just sit there all day. I'm sure all they could hear was like, anyway, so I went down to the museum, and just talking in like a bizarre voice. And the idea of the website was going to be you just go there every day and there'd just be a play button and you would just hit play and you would be able to hear this daily rant of this guy or whatever. And I started to realize that some of these probably would do well being animated. And I reached out to some animator friends to be able to ask if they wanted to animate these things. And nobody kind of wanted to do that stuff. So I went deeper into animation to figure out how to do it myself. And that's how that all came together, leading up to the first cartoon that I did,
which was Laid Off.
Which was Laid Off, A Day in the Life, and I put it up at oddtodd.com, and that was, I think, the only thing that was on the site or something. It was like that was kind of it. Maybe like a Yahoo groups board or something like that, and it went viral. And this is, pre-YouTube, pre-viral, really,
Yeah.
really, you know what I mean? And it was one of the really early first ones that went around. And I remember I sent it around to some friends, and at the end of the cartoon, there was like an email link, and I would get emails from people that I knew, and then I would get emails from people that I kind of thought like friends of friends, and I would recognize the name. I'm like, oh, look, they sent it to a friend. And then I remember getting emails from people who I didn't know. And that got weird. And then I remember getting an email from a guy in Japan who just wrote "fight" in the email. And I remember it was weird. It was like the kind of thing where, I don't know, I still have that printed out somewhere, but it was like the first like thing from across the world that came in. And then after that, things really started to get crazy, where it got really, really, there wasn't a lot to send around back then. So I think, but this also, the cartoon being about a day in the life of an unemployed person at the time when there was a lot of .com layoffs, where nobody was particularly like damaged by it, where it was just kind of, it was a sort of an exciting time to be laid off for a lot of people. I mean, some people had it hard, but for somebody who's just kind of starting out a career, it was cathartic that it struck the chord of how a lot of those people were feeling. So, which was, it beats being unemployed, beats freaking working. So, so then I put up a tip jar to PayPal or in some other places, or whatever. You could send me $1 at a PO box, and I started collecting a lot of money. Like it would ended up being tens and tens of thousands of dollars of dollar donations, and then it became a news story that ended up on CNN and New York Times, and I was on the Today Show, and it just got very crazy very fast. I mean, I remember the moment. You know what it is? It's funny because here it was, my dream coming true in a lot of ways, where I took my resume down off Monster. I realized I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew that I would never go back to being a book sales guy or whatever. I don't know where it was all going to go, but things had changed. And I remember I was living in the West Village at the time, and I remember being out on the street one day, and it was like my inbox was filled up with all sorts of requests, and there was all this cool stuff. And I remember I was really, really happy that day. And it was nothing but like joy about what had happened, that this really happened, like things really changed. And, and I was thinking, maybe this is what it feels like to be like happy all the time. And like the next day, it was like back to creative panic, financial panic, career panic. But there was a day, and maybe two, where I was totally enjoying everything, and then the same sort of panics and nervousness and insecurities and everything else, I came back, and it became a new job.
That's a heartwarming story that you experienced a day or two of fleeting happiness. But it's the anxiety and the being unemployed partly that fueled the cartoon. So I assume then you channeled that new energy into a new cartoon, figuring, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And you start making more of these cartoons.
Yeah. And it became, and that's when, I had to learn sort of a hard lesson then too, which was, the truth of it is the next cartoon I put out was sort of like a temporary, like kind of Christmassy cartoon. It wasn't like the real next cartoon, and then the next cartoon came out, and it went around, but it wasn't nearly as big as the first cartoon. And it became this sort of chase for a while where I wanted to kind of hit another grand slam home run, and I was hitting triples, and the cartoon would come out and it might be a home run, but there was no video that I put out that went nearly as big as that first cartoon went. And that became that thing for a while where, even if as successful as the cartoons were and my career was going great and all that sort of stuff, there would still be that insecurity of, I would get, 50 emails that loves the cartoon, and then I'd get one that would like say some horrible things to me, and I would like really zero in on that one. So it took a while, and I'm still something that I work on, but it takes a while to kind of shake off the idea that, there's a chance that cartoon being as massive as it was is going to be maybe the biggest cartoon, and then what? So that became tough for me as I continued to, and I did maybe 40 so on 50 cartoons for oddhot.com. It took a while to kind of accept in an artistic way that, and times had changed, and YouTube came up, and it just was a different thing. So it took a while to like adjust to that idea.
Do you think having that outlet and producing all those cartoons in a way helped you accept that? Like, was it all therapeutic? Sort of help you with some of your anxiety issues?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that what happened was, I had a book come out called The Odd Todd Handbook, and it got picked up for development at Comedy Central, as you know, and there was just a lot of activity around it. But there was a point after the book was done and after the TV show didn't make it to the air, and there were some other things that I started to work on, that there was a certain level of obligation to continue what I was doing. I had a fan base, and I felt like I wanted to continue to produce cartoons, and I still liked doing cartoons. But in some ways, I started to hear another phone ringing after a while, and I was torn because I didn't want to abandon my my website was built out to have, it was updated every day. I would write movie reviews every week. There was message boards that I had to maintain. There was all sorts of stuff just hosting a website. Plus, I started to do freelance work and some other stuff. So there was a lot that I was dealing with, but the obligation to kind of keep things going and keep everything alive became an obsession that sort of, after 7 years of doing it, or, however long, 8 years that I was regularly producing cartoons, I started to feel like I was sort of tied to it in a way that I started to think, like, am I actually, like, I just wrote a movie review for Iron Man 2 or whatever it was. Like, am I wasting my time right now? Because my traffic would go down. I was never prolific in producing cartoons. If I did one every few months, that would be, a lot, So when you're talking about a website that does 4 cartoons a year, eventually your traffic goes down. But then how do you walk away? I'm not going to just walk away from all the stuff that I built and a character that I love. But, after selling him as a TV show and a book and a sitcom, live action sitcom, and a movie to Paramount and all this sort of stuff, there was nowhere for him to go, and except for my website. And it became hard because I had larger ambitions for that character, and he would have fit into a live action sitcom, or he would have fit into a live action movie, which is what, he had sort of been repackaged as. And then when those things did not come together, and we were sort of left there, with this website and with this obligation to do more cartoons, it just became feeling like I was a bit trapped in not wanting to abandon all the people who still visited my site all the time. And a lot of them I became personally involved with. So, just to kind of all of a sudden shut off my website seemed weird. So it was a tough time.
Yeah. So how did you deal with that where you're basically in the business now of servicing this character that you created that had a really good shot at kind of
Right.
making it big in all these big money making ways. And you figured out other ways to parlay the success of Odd Todd into some money making endeavors. Like you mentioned, you were doing freelance work
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But ultimately, what's the other phone ringing that you mentioned? Did you sort of feel like you got cartoons or maybe even this character out of your system, or
Well,
or did you did you have other cartoon ideas you wanted to pursue?
I started to really like. I mean, I did a lot of work with Robert Krulwich for a while, who's maybe best known for the Radio Lab podcast, and he was working at ABC News, and he also worked at NPR, and we did a lot of really cool cartoons together and stuff that would be on like World News Tonight and 2020 and things like that. So I really kind of liked the newsy stuff, and I liked the new challenge of sort of these explainer videos, which are kind of common now. But I started to just like playing in animation and figuring out the puzzle of storytelling in animation, and inventing new characters for these different things. So I was having a lot more fun with the actual work than I was with trying to figure out what to do with the character or what to do with my website next. So that side of things started to take off, and I was getting a lot of freelance work, and I did some work for a show called America's Test Kitchen, and all sorts of things started coming out of the woodwork. And I remember being thrilled that I was making a living as an animator, period. Like whenever I got down about things, if I got down about the fact that TV show never became a TV show, I would always look back to when I was, selling books and being miserable because I didn't know what I needed to do. So it was always a relief to think like, I'm sitting here in front of my computer in my underwear, drawing pictures and making voices, and I'm being paid, and I'm paying my rent this way. What is a thrill that kind of just never really goes away. There's up days and down days and stuff like that, but it became I still enjoy doing it, but it will always be sad to me that the Odd Todd character never grew into something bigger than he deserved a bigger world, I think. And I think that's when I started to move toward other things, is being frustrated because the world on my website was just too small for what I wanted him to do. And because the Odd Todd movie script was actually really well received by people, I started to also go more into writing scripts. So, and it's funny because in the original cartoon, that's one of the things the original character tried to do, is write a movie script and figure out that it's really hard to write a whole script. So
Yeah.
so that was one of the.
It's worth pointing out that I think one of the reasons that first cartoon was such a big hit and the character was recognized by so many people in the industry was because the writing in the first cartoon was so good and it was so sharp and the timing was so good. So it totally makes sense that everybody wanted to leverage it, but maybe just everybody discovered, or I mean, that's just how it is in show business. Not everything makes it.
Yeah.
But it's impressive that you were able to parlay that into other work, and I'm excited to hear ultimately where that went. But first, I just want to take you back 1 second to the freelance work that you were getting. Was that all coming to you through the website and just having people find it and call you, or were you out pounding the pavement a little bit?
No, it was literally like just people writing in. Robert just wrote in through the website. And it was just people who were fans of the site, and I would post, a freelance video, stuff like that. So, for the most part, the work that I do and a lot of times, after a while, the people that were unemployed and fans of Odd Todd, grew up a little bit and got jobs where they were actually able to order, videos for their own thing. Like actually, I do a lot of work for Hewlett Packard now, and explaining security stuff and blah, blah, blah. And the original inroad was somebody who just was unemployed back then and is now, a vice president at Hewlett Packard, who was like reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to do some work for us?" So yeah, for the most part, it's the rare occasion that, to be honest, I'm not sure if I think I've reached out for work, but I don't think I've ever got work by reaching out. I think I'm not a great networker, but people who write in, and for the most part, my freelance work is fortunately received and not me running around doing stuff.
Yeah, that's so interesting. You get all that work through the entertainment that you created, not through your sales skills, which presumably is why they hired you for those sales jobs before you started doing cartooning. So once you sort of realize that Odd Todd, has kind of had his chance and is not going to break,
right.
What other sorts of things do you start working on in addition to the freelance work?
Well, I mean, there was a section of my site that I used to update all the time called What's Happening. And if you go to oddtodd.com and you just click on What's Happening, there's a gigantic list of essays and stuff that I think that stuff was sort of pre-blog stuff. So it may, as much as sometimes I look back and I'm like, God, I used to just sit there and just write all this stuff. It really became a practice ground for me to kind of figure out what to write. And it became a challenge, after I realized I could write a script, it became a challenge because the voice that I was kind of best in, which is this kind of 30-something single guy, man child, likes to snack on cookies and watch TV, became sort of a bit much bigger thing with like the Apatow movies and the Seth Rogen stuff and all that. So, it became much bigger than it was, I guess, when my first cartoon broke. And it also, the direction that it started to go in, it was just, I think my stuff was almost a little bit tame compared to as things got sort of like more into drug-fueled stuff, more into raunchy stuff. It was, I kind of felt like I needed to make a decision like, I kind of have to kind of get into this world or go the other way and do something sweeter and nicer or do something altogether different. So I just kind of started looking around in my head for different ways to tell stories and different stories to tell rather than what could be happening to a 30-something guy who has a lot of free time, And
are you sort of fueled now by the need to sort of stay working in the entertainment business, or are you feeling that same urge to get your stuff out there because you think the other stuff that's out there isn't good?
No, I mean, I think in a lot of ways right now, I mean, I've sold 2 scripts. One is a science fiction drama, and one is science fiction horror.
Screenplays or
screenplays?
Okay.
And they're both kind of moving, and they both are like they're both alive in the system. So in an ideal world, I feel the call to just be a bigger writer than an animator. And in a way, I kind of look at what I do now is that animator Todd some years supports writer Todd, and other times writer Todd is the one who pays the bills. So I feel fortunate in a way that I have this sort of safety net of animation work to kind of fuel the new dream, which is to get a movie made, and be able to have the freedom to just write all the time. So that's kind of what I've been working toward now, I guess, is to figure out to continue figuring out that voice. And as much as I feel like I will always be doing animation in one way or another, it's weird. Like when people ask what I do, I've transitioned to say writer than animator. And people get into what I am or who I am, but it took a while to kind of accept that it's a weird transition because what I'm known for and is my animation. So my default feeling in terms of career is to say I'm an animator who does writing stuff, and it's taken a while to kind of be comfortable in the idea of saying that as my first answer, even though my writing has not nearly been as recognized as the animation stuff, which is interesting, at least for now.
Yeah, but you were always writing because you wrote the animated bits.
That's true.
And you've just continued with the writing and expanded the writing and sort of, shook off the animation.
Right.
Maybe you just got that out of your system and you realize, okay, I can do it better than those other people. And it sounds like you've just zeroed in on the thing that maybe was really driving you, was just that urge to tell stories and entertain people just by stuff coming out of your head.
Yeah. And it's funny because, I mean, I've always felt like I was funny-ish, but it's interesting that it's come around to me writing science fiction stuff and me writing horror stuff, because that's the stuff that I used to love to do. And that's the stuff that I originally used to cartoon a lot. It was just weird stuff and violent stuff and stuff like that. So there's something about what I'm doing now that feels like, in a way, where when I was like the 23-year-old kid sitting in my room, all of a sudden dawns on me that I could be a cartoonist. I kind of am getting that weird thing now where it's like, it took a while to kind of realize that this is something you could do. They could do it. I'm able to be, it's something they could do. So now that is what I am doing, which is what I kind of, I think when it all comes back around again, is what the biggest dream has always been to get a movie made. So that is what I pursue. Yeah.
And they're both dramas, these scripts that you sold and the scripts you're working on. They're not necessarily comedies.
They're not comedies, but part of the strength of the scripts is actually that the funny character in it isn't just the funny character in it. It's actually a really funny character. Do you know what I mean? So
I do.
Probably some of the appeal of it all, and the reason why people respond to them is because it's definitely not a comedy, but it's obviously got a lot of funny in it. So
yeah, because all those big, any big sci-fi movie or a big horror movie is expected to have laughs and have really good laughs in them, but they usually are not good. And so to come at it from a comedy writer's perspective, it's a lot easier for a comedy writer to write drama and then inject, the amount of humor that's necessary. And like you said, just make that humor really good.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think there's a really fine line between sci-fi, horror, and humor, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, horror movies, for the most part, I just went and saw It Follows, and, for the most part, I'm laughing when the scare, so there is something good about that. But above everything, I always feel that straight comedy and writing something that is really, really funny is the hardest of all by far. There's a lot of, I think in a lot of ways, sometimes it's cheating to write horror because it's a little easier sometimes to figure out a horror situation than to really write something that's generally funny, which I think will always be the hardest nut to crack.
I couldn't agree more. And it's easier to write comedy within a horror script because you've got the automatic contrast of the serious, scary horror to play against. Yeah.
It's almost like, sometimes in the animation world, I do a lot of science-oriented stuff, and sometimes I end up at some like physics conference because I get invited to kind of explain how these crazy physics people could like explain their I know what they call it, their physicsness or whatever they're working on. So like I'm brought in as sort of like a creative element where it's, there's just like in any other business in the physics world, physicists clamor for attention and eyeballs and things like that. So they bring out my cartoons to be like, this is a way to kind of do a primer sort of thing. But in an audience like that, when you get up in front of the room and it's like physics, it's like the most comfortable room to get up and be funny at because people are just so relieved to be laughing is almost like the way it is for horror and slipping comedy into a horror movie where it's like you're kind of teeing up a very easy crowd, to appreciate something that may not be so deserving of the laughs it gains.
Yes, exactly. You don't have to work as hard to get laughs there. So what's the story with the Odd Todd website right now? Are you doing any work updating it? Do you do any more cartoons for fun ever on there?
I do not. I do occasionally link up some of the freelance work that I do, whether it's for like TV show or whatever. I also have an Odd Todd Studios website, which is separate.
That's the freelance work.
That's the freelance work where people could go. If you go to oddtoddstudios.com, you could see my ABC News work. I did work for a show called the IFC Media Project and NPR, and I did a series for Time Magazine and some other stuff. But the website, I had to do that step back that took me a long time to do. And having that sort of cathartic let go of that daily obligation of posting a new what's happening and writing a new movie review and doing a new cartoon. I just it wasn't the phone that was ringing anymore. There is an active message board called the Daily Fact message board, which is a survivor and is active daily on the site. And my Instagram feed is hooked up to the homepage, and I do put like a new video up, and I kind of change the links sometimes. But for the most part, it is an archive of the writing and the movie reviews, which are fantastic, and
they're all accurate, right?
All of them are 100% accurate.
They're the definitive opinion.
Pick any movie, you will absolutely agree with me. And even if they didn't agree with me in the first place, like they go back and whether it's like Dark Knight or something like that, where it's like, yeah, everyone loves Dark Knight, but you go back and watch Dark Knight, that's what I got. So there's a lot there to kind of go through and check out.
Your movies are too deep in the bowels of the system at this point to tell us anything about those, I imagine.
I actually cannot, because both of them have like a big hooks that they haven't announced yet, but they both have directors attached, and one of them's in casting, and there's things that are happening. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's exciting, and we'll see. It's weird because I live in LA now, and I go and actually I write in a coffee shop, and I sit down next to the bank of people who are sitting in front of their laptops, and everyone's working on scripts. But I do think of it in some ways, hopefully in the same way that I looked at the early animation stuff that I saw at Adam Films and be like, well, I could do better than that. So hopefully that will prove to be true, because it's I would like to, above everything else, at some point, get away from my computer and see something happen around me rather than through me, that kind of thing.
Well, I certainly wish you all the success in the world with this new direction that your career is taking. And
thank you.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. It's been great.
I appreciate this ability to be able to kind of talk about what I've been doing, because it actually is a common question that I get from people, and now I could direct them to this podcast. Be like, you want to know what I'm doing? Click on that link, and I'll
the full long answer.
You get the full long answer.
You can find more podcasts like this and other comedy writing resources at howtowritefunny.com. Check it out.